I was not moving my head too much, but I was looking in the rearview mirror to see if there were two big men who were going to come get me. He said, I am trusting you to wear my wedding ring for a week. I can't say no to this. This guy is all powerful. If I say no, then I get punished. There was a different target every time, but you never knew when it was going to be you. She was just pale. She wasn't okay. And I had to be a party to this.
The Worldwide Association of Specialty Programs and Schools was a major player in the so-called troubled teens industry, operating dozens of rehabilitation centers and reform schools all over the United States. They made millions of dollars per year rehabilitating at-risk youths until a number of former students, including Paris Hilton and Kat Von D, came forward with horrific stories of extreme abuse by staff members at the schools. Spring Creek Lodge Academy was one of the most notorious facilities, and former student Cami joins us today to share her experience living at Spring Creek for a year and a half in the late 90s. Now, Cami's story can be very graphic at times and may be triggering for some people, so viewer discretion is highly advised. Welcome to the Cult of Troubled Teens.
So it was the 90s. I was living in the Bay Area, California, so near San Francisco, about 20 minutes without traffic, probably like 2 hours with traffic from San Francisco. And my family was Mormon. And so I had a lot of influences from all over the place. But my family was very conservative. And so when I was 15, I started smoking fairly often. I did acid a couple of times, and I was ditching school. I definitely wasn't going to school. So I was definitely having some problems. And I would say that all of that was really at the root of it was just a really profound depression. I was really sad, and I didn't know how to talk about it. And I was desperate to kind of escape my own mind at that time. And so I think that my drug use was self-medicating. I have some really vague memories of sexual abuse from when I was really small. And also when I was just on the cusp of puberty, I think between 12 and 14, I had hit my head twice. Once in a car accident, I broke the windshield twice with my forehead. I was probably 13 or 14 then. And then another time I dived into a pool and I didn't know how shallow it was and I hit my head. And,
Wow.
we didn't know much about traumatic brain injury at that time, but now we know that it often leads to depression. But here I was, just a kid left with this feeling of, why am I like this? Why am I so miserable? And again, I think that's what led to the drug use. But I should also preface that with I was a real nerd at 15, and I was very protective of like the health of my body and mind. And so I went to the public library because we didn't have the internet, not really. And I researched all the drugs, and I made a yes column and I made a no column. And I'm 42 now. And I have stuck to that list the entire time. So where I didn't know that weed was psychologically addictive, that wasn't really in the literature that I read. So I was a little shocked by that to find that I was doing it every day and I wasn't stopping. But I had limited myself. I even decided that alcohol wasn't something that I was going to do because of the effects on your brain and, alcoholism. So I didn't want an addiction, but I did want to try some drugs. And so that was where I was coming from. But my mom had, she was really steeped in kind of Reagan era messaging that said that smoking, that's a gateway drug. And, they genuinely thought I'd be dead in a ditch in no time, So,
Right.
But I never have done any other drug, I haven't done cocaine, I haven't tried anything else just because I am really picky about that kind of thing, like what I put in my body.
You know what else is interesting about that, Cami? Because I grew up in a very conservative Christian household as well, and the rules are extremely strict. There's so much rigidity in that type of environment, right? And so when you start experimenting, like any normal teenager is going to do, there's a tendency in these types of fundamental religious groups to immediately react and overreact. So it
Yes.
sounds like,
Yeah.
you were just kind of going through normal adolescent stuff,
Yeah.
and there was a strong reaction from your parents, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah. And you know, yes, the depression was intense. And you just reminded me of something. Like, I think another reason that I was depressed was because my family was Mormon. And from literally some of my earliest memories are questioning the church and just going, this doesn't feel right. I don't think it's true. And when you are surrounded by people who are not only telling you that your instincts are wrong, but also telling you that it's a moral failing that you feel that way, that maybe,
Mm-hmm.
God is punishing you or you haven't asked sincerely. That's a really big thing. I mean, I was spending nights on my knees sobbing through my entire teenagerhood. Please give me a testimony. Please, God, let
Mm-hmm.
me know that this is true. And I never got an answer. And everybody around me, or at least, the people in my immediate family and friends, all had a testimony. They all believed that the church was true. I mean, not my friends that I chose, but my family. And so I think that was a huge contributor to depression, just feeling like I had to suppress what I really believed. So yeah, I think that was part of it
Oh
too.
yeah, absolutely. And that's so relatable. And once again, especially at this age, when the hormones are kicking in and you're starting to realize things for yourself and thinking independently, right? You were just
Yeah.
having, maybe a little mini existential crisis at that point. So you've got this crisis happening, right?
Mhm.
And your parents, I'm assuming, found out that you were experimenting with plant-based medicine, let's call it. And
Yeah.
that's what precipitated them sending you to Spring Creek at that point.
Yeah. So, and actually, they told me about it. They told me that they wanted to send me to this program. It was actually a therapist who sent like 4 or 5 of my friends. They really targeted wealthy areas, and the Bay Area is a wealthy area. And so,
Sure.
knowing that our parents had the means to pay for it, they had therapists on the ground who were, recommending this. Later it was,
Mm.
education consultants who were more doing that. I don't know if they existed when I was young. My grandparents took me, and I think they fought really hard to be able to take me. Because the program wanted you to get gooned. They wanted to send 2 big men to your house in the middle of the night and take you. I think that costs, I mean, upwards now of around $10,000. I'm not sure how much it was when I was young, but my grandparents were pretty cheap, and they're like, no, we can handle her. She's not going to run away. Let us take her. So yeah, my grandparents took me up, and I think they also wanted to see the place and wanted to see the kids and see if it looked like people were being
Right.
abused. And yeah, I just have a lot of thoughts about that. But yeah, they took me, and I went willingly because in my life, my parents' friends really liked me. My teachers all liked me. It seemed like nobody really thought I was this huge problem except for my own mom. It felt like she disapproved of everything I did, everything I was, everything I liked. And so I was just kind of desperate to get out of that situation where I was feeling so disapproved of, I guess. And I thought for sure, like, I'm a really reasonable person and I'm not super disrespectful to adults. And so I just thought, yeah, if I go to some boarding school, then I'm going to do great. There's no
Mm.
reason they shouldn't like me. And I just had no idea that anything like Spring Creek existed in the world. I had no idea. Why would I imagine it would be like that? I mean, I was imagining meeting boys and doing like
Hmm.
theater stuff and, doing artsy stuff and maybe learning like an instrument in a beautiful place with trees. I love trees. I'm like a nature lover. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I was really excited to go.
What was that intake process like for you? What was that experience?
Well, you know, so it was really strange. I think they were a little understaffed the day that I arrived, and they had a 13-year-old girl do my intake. They had a staff member kind of standing in the doorway. She didn't seem to know what she was doing. She was brand new. And so they just had this 13-year-old girl going through my stuff, my underwear, and just making this discard pile. And I was just looking at this girl like, dude, you're I thought she was 11 or 12, because like in the program they kind of just erased any personality or style, so I thought she was like 11 or 12. and
Right.
and so I was asking her, I was like, oh, are you like one of the staff's kids, or like what's going on? And she's like, I'm level 5. And I was like, okay. And so she's going through all my stuff, and I'm just like, why is this 13-year-old doing this? But I was going to be cool about it, and I was trying to be nice to her. I thought, oh, I'm this cool older kid, she's probably like intimidated, that's why she's being so cold. But she's like going through my CDs and just throwing my CDs in the discard pile, and my Nirvana t-shirts, and like,
Oh no.
what else?
The vintage
Yeah,
Nirvana t-shirts? Oh.
Nirvana like,
That hurts my
how
heart.
dare I? And I remember before I went, I didn't bring the Nevermind t-shirt with the little penis showing. And I didn't bring the In Utero t-shirt with the like see-through woman. I just brought the one with the
Uh-huh.
smiley face. And I was like, how can they disapprove of that? But whatever. So that's when I first started getting an inkling, wow, this is kind of crazy. And I had 2 books. I had Les Mis, which, yeah, I was reading that book, and I had Train Spotting.
Those are 2 very different pieces of literature, Cami.
I know, I know. I was a weird kid. I loved to read. So I was just like, and I thought there would be books there, so I just brought 2. Anyway, she like opened Train Spotting, and she's like, she's like, I should get you in trouble for even having this. I was like, okay. And she, threw those in the discard pile. So I mean, I wasn't that horrified by that, because I actually had been in kind of like an adolescent psych ward for a week, because my mom called the police when she found out that I was smoking weed, which they were laughing about. But my mom had also called all of my friends' parents and told them what their kids, because I was a journaler, like I was a write, I had a hypergraphia, like I would write about everything, which is so stupid. I can't believe I did that. But she called all of my friends' parents, and so my friends were mad at me, and she just like kind of ripped away my support system. So when the
Hmm.
police arrived, I was crying really hard, and I couldn't stop crying. And I think they were like getting ready to get off shift. They were there for like an hour. And finally they're like, okay, looks like you guys can't seem, because my mom's yelling at me and stuff. They're like, we're just going to put her in this hospital. Right. And so I ended up at this adolescent psych ward, and there they had strip searched me and everything, but they really explained it well. Like they said, we're not trying to like make this undignified for you, but there's girls here who have problems with self-harm and drugs and stuff, and we really just want to keep everybody safe. So that's why we're, going through your stuff and making sure there's nothing sharp. And so that just felt really caring to me. So when I was strip searched at the program, they weren't as nice about it. In fact, they were kind of rude. But I just thought,
Hmm.
okay, it's because they care. It's because they don't want anybody to hurt themselves or whatever. So I still didn't think it was all that terrible. But yeah, so then they took me into the kind of cafeteria, they called it the Hungry Horse, to introduce me to my family. And just looking at these girls, I was like, holy shit, like they do not look okay. Like it was just, they were wiped of all personality. Their hair was all stringy. Their eyes looked dead. I
Hmm.
don't know if you've spent a lot of time with people who are really experiencing like serious mental health problems, but just this
Hmm.
1,000-yard, really weird stare. None of them were allowed to speak to me. So, and I had already gotten in trouble for walking through a doorway without permission. You have to ask permission to walk through every doorway, and for asking a question, so speaking without permission. So I was already a little bit like, okay, that's weird. And then I see these girls, and then they all started introducing themselves. And so that would sound something like this. Like the staff allowed them to introduce themselves. So we sat in a circle, and they were like, so this is the way I would introduce myself in the program. Hi, I'm Cami. I'm level 1. I'm an honest, worthy, giving, powerful, and passionate young woman. I'm here because I disrespected my parents and I was smoking weed and ditching school and I had no self-respect. And, I was an attention suck and a slut or something like that. And then, I've been here 3 months or something. And then, so it just went around this circle. And then they asked me to introduce myself. And as soon as I did, all the girls like shot up their hands and I was like, whoa. And the staff were like, you guys are on silence. Don't give her feedback. Not right now. And I was like, what was that? And so right after that, the door opens and this guy walks in, and it was Chafin, who's like the co-director. And he's like, oh, where's the new girl? And everybody's like, it's her. And so he runs over to me. He's like, girl, stand up, give her feedback. And he's like, new girl, stand on the table. And I was like, what? And he's like, stand up on the table. And I was like, what are you even talking about? Like, I was already kind of crying, I was like scared in a new place. And so I was like, okay. So I stood up on this table and he's like, give her feedback, girls. And all of these girls just kind of looked like, we don't want to. And so then he like understood that he had made like kind of an unpopular request. Like nobody wanted to give me feedback. I didn't even know what that was. So then he goes, okay, sing her happy birthday, because it was my 16th birthday. And
Oh,
so I'm
wow.
standing on this table. Yeah, I forgot to mention it was my 16th birthday. So I'm standing on this table bawling, just sobbing, just a mess. All my clothes had been taken away. I was embarrassed to be introduced to this new group of girls in these like ugly preppy clothes my mom had picked out for me. And suddenly they're like, and it's like this, it's like, happy birthday to, like, just these dead-faced girls. And I'm up there bawling my eyes out. And he's just laughing and he goes, oh, I heard you chose to come here. Is it everything you thought it would be? Ah, ha, ha. And then he just leaves. And it was just the weirdest, like most surreal, I don't know.
That
Like,
just sounds diabolical a little bit, like
oh,
intentionally
it gets
mean.
worse. So yeah, but I mean, like if you just read about that on paper, you just feel like, so they sang her happy birthday. Like, what's the big deal? Nobody made me
Right.
stand on a table to do it, but whatever. Okay, I was still trying to like calm myself down. I was like, it's not a big deal, whatever. So we went through the rest of the day, and the entire time we're not allowed to talk at all. And as you can probably tell, I'm a talker, so that was a little bit hard for me. Nobody, it's just, we go to class totally silent. Nobody's allowed to talk. You're not allowed to look around at each other. You're not allowed to look out the window. That's run plans. If you look at another student, that's cheating. Like, so that was really crazy. But, but sorry, I'm trying to like come back to what I've noticed is when I talk about the program, and keep in mind, this is 25 years later, a lot of times I find that I'm not like breathing steadily.
Mm.
And I find I get really animated. And then afterward, I forget everything that I said. And I just can't remember
Mm.
any, and I get into like a really heightened state. And I don't know how long it's been since I've been talking about it. So I apologize.
No, you're fine. So this first day was obviously extremely traumatic for you. Just getting used to a new environment on your 16th birthday. The expectations that you had going in completely shattered. Not at all what you thought this program was going to be.
Yes.
Not the fun little vacation that was pitched to you. But you were in this thing for 1.5 years. So can you give me some insight just as far as what that time was like for you?
So for 3 days, it was just complete silence with these girls. I didn't get to talk to any of them. I didn't get to know any of them. And the program just, it has rules literally governing everything you do. For us, it was no speaking without permission, no going through a doorway without permission, no standing up without permission, no sitting down without permission. You could get consequences for facial expressions. You could get consequences for bad posture. You could get consequences for nonverbal communication. We had to walk in lines where it was like, here's the person ahead and here's the person behind. And you literally have to match their steps. It's called a heel toe line. and in a line with girls of different sizes. I would have some girl's butt pushing my stomach back when we stopped, and some girl, like I would be like in the shoulder blades of that girl. It was just really hard, even just like walking from place to place. So, and you just get consequences left and right. So basically, my very first day, I was like, okay, I can see this is bigger than me. I am literally going to conform so hard that they will have no choice but to let me out. Like, I will do everything they say. I will try my hardest to do everything they want me to do. And so
Mm.
that's how I went in, because I was just like, this is a nightmare, but I can see they they also really put a very strong sales pitch on your parents, and they tell your parents you need to write your kid a letter, a commitment letter that says you are finishing this program, you're graduating this program, we absolutely will not take you out early. And then I've seen the paperwork of like the other things they say to the parents, and they say like, what kind of a weak parent are you if you made that commitment and then you let your kid come home early? And so
Mm.
so I knew, like, okay, I'm in it to win it. Like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get out of here as quickly as possible. Um, and so I was trying to follow all the rules, but I was still getting, consequences left and right, just constant punishment and loss of points and everything like that. But that's all I didn't get to talk to anybody or anything for 3 days. We didn't even have group because they were having a silence challenge. So there was literally like no sound at any moment. But 3 days in, on my third night, at probably about 3 in the morning, we didn't have access to clocks or anything, so I don't know the actual time. But about 3 in the morning, that guy Chafin came into our cabin, told us to get up, told us to get dressed, told us that we wouldn't need a coat or anything, and took us outside. Our normal day staff were not there, so there were no adult women present. It was him and a kid from the boys' side who was 17, maybe. And he marched us down to this place they called the gravel pit. And it was raining and sleeting, very cold. We were in t shirts, and had us do just several hours of very strenuous exercise. For example, we'd be doing push-ups and they'd be pushing down on our backs, with our hands in this freezing cold water. He wanted us to build. Sorry, I've got a fly in here. He wanted us to build a 6 foot by 6 foot by 6 foot rock wall, but all there was gravel. So we were just trying to push gravel together, and then he got mad at us because we didn't build our rock wall. Um, and so all this was going on, but I was like a pretty athletic kid. I loved exercise. I loved being outside. So even though all the other girls were crying and stuff, like that didn't really, I wasn't bothered by this situation. I was kind of like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, let's go. Finally, we're doing something, at least, because it'd been 3 days of just total robot silence. And then he did, at the very end, he did kind of a race where the 17-year-old boy had to rush us around. And I just kind of felt like, okay, at least we're doing something like that. That would be considered abusive, I'm sure, by a lot of people. But to me, I was like, cool. But then he marched us back to our cabin and got us in a circle. And I thought, okay, we just did this hard thing. Maybe now we're off that silence challenge. Like maybe they'll give us like hot chocolate and I'll finally get to talk to these girls, and maybe we'll get to sleep in, because every day we would get up at like 6 and have 3 minutes to make our bed and 3 minutes to shower. And so I just thought, oh yay, things are going to get better now. But he had us, it was probably, the sun was coming up, so it's like 5 or 6 in the morning, and he had us get in a circle and and give feedback. And what that looked like for the girls who'd been there a while and kind of knew each other was mostly like encouragement. They would say, "Oh, I saw your leadership skills out there," or whatever. Um, and so I thought, wow, I'm the new girl, and I did really well. I was running really fast, and I did all these push-ups, and I kept up with everybody, even though they've been doing this for months, and I, am fresh off the street. So I kind of expected to get some of that praise too. But while we're standing in this circle, the guy Chafin stepped forward and he like lowers his voice. He told everybody to stand up, and he's right here in my face, and I could smell his breath, and he lowers his voice and he goes, Cami, your name offends me. And I'm like, what? And he goes, my sister-in-law's name is Cami, and she's so great. And my brother's name is Cameron, and he's awesome. And I can't believe they share a similar name as you. And I
Wow.
was just like shocked. I'm a 16-year-old girl, and I thought I just did really good. And I've been trying so hard to follow all the rules. And so he just steps back, and I just was like, what? And then it was just fair game.
Hmm.
Sorry. Just a free for all, one by one. Every one of these girls steps forward and just starts screaming in my face. And
Hmm.
I didn't know any of them, but like I had cried a lot. Over the previous 3 days, I'd been crying a lot. And so that came up a lot. Oh, you're such a crybaby. What they called it was PPM, poor pitiful me. You make me sick. I hate even being in the same room as you. Like, you are disgusting. Uh, and then just making like, you know, guesses kind of about what I'd been doing before I got there, and calling me a slut, and just on and it's I don't know how long it went on, but
Wow.
for a very long time, or it felt like a very long time. And I was just so in shock. Um and so, like, one of them was like, you're smirking, and I was like, how could I be smirking? Like, but I wasn't allowed to say anything. If I said something, they go, no rebuttals. Like, the whole group would just scream it all at once, no rebuttals. um and so yeah, then one girl said, oh, like, you act like you're so sad, but actually you're a bitch, I can tell. And she's like, push everybody, you have to push everybody. And so, like, I had to push all the girl, like, until they stumbled back. And, oh, you're not even, that's not who you are, like, you're really angry, like, you got to push them harder. So I'm like pushing all these girls that I've been with them 24/7 for the last 3 days. I don't know them at all. We haven't had a chance to talk, and now I'm physically accosting them because they're making me do that. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was really crazy. And then at the very end, Chafin goes, "Okay, Cami, you need to kneel down, and I want you to put your nose where the wall and the floor meet, like in that little corner." And if you want to know how hard that is, give it a try next time you're in a room with a wall and a floor. But it was really awkward. My butt was up in the air. I was sneezing. I hit my nose, and it was bleeding. And I'm like in this corner, and he just left me there, and I was still there,
Wow.
all my muscles straining, trying to keep my nose in the corner, until the day staff came back, and they were just like, okay, I guess you can get up now. Like, it was just really crazy. So
Oh my God.
that was my third day.
Wow. So that kind of disciplinary action was routine for the entire year and a half that you were there.
It wasn't always me. There was a different target every time, but you never knew when it was going to be you.
Hmm.
So just that living on pins and needles, constantly. Also, we had to share in group. And so usually every day there would be an hour of group with your family. I think we didn't do it on Sundays. Um, and so you would have to share. And man, we were 16-year-old upper middle class, like, we didn't have a lot to share. And the things that maybe I should have shared, like if I were in therapy, for example, I wouldn't share there, because you really had to know that the thing that you were sharing was something where you could control the narrative. Because so
I see.
group was like this. One girl would, or girls would raise their hand who wants to share, and one girl would share, and then everybody would give her feedback. And 80% of the time it was it was really negative. So if you shared, oh, I had a sexual assault, oh, I bet, oh my gosh, the way you dressed before you got here, I bet you were asking for it. Like, what did you do? You led that guy on. That's why you were assaulted, or you didn't take any responsibility for, the sexual assault or whatever. Um, and, you would think like we would be like, okay, I'm never going to share because all we get is shit, if we share anything. But
Right.
but you had to share, or they would say that you were being invisible and that you weren't working your program, and that just meant that you were going to be stuck there for God knows how long. You had to share. They would call
So you
you
had
a
to be very
ghost. They'd say, oh,
calculated about how you shared with the group.
well, I was. Not everybody was, and boy, did they get punished for that, man. Like
Mm.
I I mean, I became so strategic in that program. I mean, from day one, I was gathering clues and just figuring, okay, what do I have to do here? Uh, but a lot of girls weren't. And the girls who had like genuine mental health problems,
Mm.
uh, it was really bad for them.
So this wasn't a licensed therapist situation. This
Oh,
was
God, no.
like a
No,
group exercise. Okay.
no.
Mm.
And in fact, our family therapist had no, so she was kind of the liaison between the kid and your family at home, and they called her a family therapist. I think later they knew that was illegal, so they started calling them a family rep, but they had no qualifications. And
Mm.
I've since gotten a hold of some of the paperwork for these people, and they were they were really salespeople. Like that was their job, was
Yeah.
to convince, if parents were starting to lose their nerve or to say, no, I think I want my kid home now. Their job was to use every means necessary to manipulate and convince those parents not to let their kid come home. And to
Mm.
graduate the program, which the program has total control over that. They control how many consequences you get. They control if you get dropped. Um, I have, so actually, I would love to, I could send it to you and you could do a screenshot or something. But just the things that they said to the parents to keep kids in were just crazy. And meanwhile, we had zero open communication with our parents. We had to write one letter a week to our parents, but so we would get like 20 minutes a day, I think it was, to work on our letter. And at the end of the week, you would give it to the staff and the staff would read it. And if you said something that they said was manipulation, they'd rip it up and you would get a category 2 consequence, which could result in level drops for not writing to your family. So they would just
Mm.
rip everything up. And then anything that was coming in, they would mark out with a black marker, or wouldn't give you, like obviously I couldn't get letters from my friends. I could only get letters from my family. And then phone calls, when you got to a high enough level to get one. I got one within like a month because I was like really doing whatever I could to work this program. But the family rep would literally sit there with her phone or with her finger on the receiver. So if I said something like, this place is terrible, please get me out, she'd hang up, which I never did because by
Mm.
then I knew the score, right? So you had zero communication with your parents, open communication.
Yeah, it sounds like all the communication was censored, it was monitored, it was managed,
Yes. Yeah.
and you didn't have the ability to have a voice at all.
There was no way to get the word out about what was happening.
Yeah.
If I had even had the words to say, hey, this is abuse, and I didn't at that time, to me, abuse was hitting and, beating somebody up. I didn't know there was physical or sorry, I didn't know there was emotional or, verbal abuse. But there was no way to tell anybody what was going on.
That's one of the questions that I had actually, Cami. Some of the other stories that I've read, that I've heard, talk to some of the physical abuse, including abuse that's sexual in nature. Did you witness or experience any of that at Spring Creek?
No, I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
mean, I've thought about that because I actually, even while I was in the program, I knew it was happening to other girls. I had heard rumors that other girls were being sexually abused by staff, but it never happened to me. And like, huh, was I just not attractive enough for him? Or was it that they knew that I would crumble like a cookie the second, that I would tell somebody
Mm.
immediately. I just had such a guilt complex or whatever. But there was at least one girl who had a sexual relationship um, with her family therapist, who was not really a therapist. But there was, for example, I told you about my third day when Chafin took us out and ran us around, and then the feedback, and then the nose in the corner. Um, I think it was the next day we were having group, and he comes running in, and he had a heart shaped, like a piece of paper with in a heart shape that he had burned around the edges and colored with a crayon, and he had written on it, "True beauty comes from within," or something like that. And he had tied his wedding ring to a piece of yellow yarn that was tied also on this piece of paper. And he gave it to me like a
Mm.
Valentine. And he said, "I am trusting you to wear my wedding ring for a week."
What?
Yeah, like what the fuck? I mean, if I hadn't lived it, I wouldn't believe it. If somebody was telling me this story, I'd be like, why would he do that? That is so weird.
Yeah, that's so strange, especially coming from the guy that said he was offended by your name. Just
Yeah.
so bizarre.
Yeah. And he's married. He's fat. He's got a kid. I was just, and everybody around me, because this happened in groups. So there's witnesses, and everybody's going, "Oh, that's so sweet. Oh, Cami, like you're so lucky." And I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, what is this? And so I'm like, oh, and I started crying because I was like, I can't say no to this. This guy is all powerful. If I say no, then I get punished forever. God knows how
Right.
long.
Mm-hmm.
I'd seen enough. I knew enough by this. So I just, and I put it on, and I had to wear that shit for a week. So, no, that's not sexual abuse. He never touched me, but that's fucking weird.
Did they utilize any types of solitary confinement at the Spring Creek
Yeah.
facility?
Yeah, they called it the Hobbit. And
Oh,
the Hobbit, yeah. That didn't happen to me while I was there because, again, I was like 100% like really, really careful. It didn't save me from most things, but it saved me from that. But I did work as a junior staff once I got on level 4 in the Hobbit. And I don't even know how to describe it. I don't even know how to describe it. Just the boys would tend to be more physical. Some would, smear their feces on the walls. Some would make themselves bleed. One guy like wrote "Let Freedom Ring" on the wall. The girls were
mm.
more just, you could just see, because my job was to sit outside the door. I wasn't allowed to talk to them or interact with them at all. Peek through the window every once in a while, make sure they were alive and breathing, I guess, and then take them to the bathroom. Uh, and these girls, after even just a day in there, but several days, I can't even describe the look in their eyes. I can't even
Mm.
just, you don't see it. You don't see that look in everyday life. There
Right.
was one girl who, I hope it's okay to talk about this, but she was on her period. She'd been bleeding for a month. She was using 2 super tampons every
Oh
time.
no.
I think it was just a physiological response to the trauma she was going through. They never took her to the doctor, and she was just pale.
Mm.
She wasn't okay. And I had to be a party to this. I had to be the one watching the door and taking her to the bathroom, and just like, if I said anything to her, I couldn't guarantee that she wouldn't tell anybody that I'd said something. So it's one thing to like witness abuse. It's another thing to have to like play a role in it
Right.
against your will.
And this was just you being on staff like this. It was just part of you working the program within Spring Creek,
Yeah.
right? Like this was during the year and a half time that you were there.
Yeah.
I got you.
There's no way you're getting out without being junior staff, basically. Um, So you had to do stuff like that. But I did experience solitary, not for the reasons that other people did. There were a series of seminars that you had to get through in order to progress in the levels and to eventually go home. And I had just gone through with flying colors, all of them, because again, I was watching and I was figuring out, okay, what do you want from me? I'll do it. Like, you know, and not all the kids were that lucky, like not all of them. And some of them who I really admire this, just rebelled from day one. You know, they were just like, fuck this place. It's horrible, you know. But I really tried to do whatever they wanted. Anyway, I think it was the fourth seminar. They started with a thing they called them processes, where we had to rate ourselves and like our performance on the facility. And I was level 4, so I was supposed to be like really good. And everybody else rated themselves over 80%. And I was too humble or something. And I rated myself a 75. And that was just, they tore into me. So it was kind of like the feedback thing, but this was like 40 or 50 people just screaming in my face. And I was in the middle and screaming in my face. And so then they said, well, you've chosen out of the seminar. And the language that they use is very manipulative. So they would tell your parents, oh, she chose out of the seminar. She chose not to do it. But really, they were telling me I had to leave. Right. So they walked me out and they put me in solitary for an hour or two. And I was like, fucking great. Like, when I'm alone, nobody could hurt me. This is wonderful. Like, please just leave me alone forever, you know? And then after 2 or 3 hours, they brought me back into that seminar and they did the same thing with the kids circling up and screaming at me for I don't know how long. And then they took me back to solitary. And then a few hours, they brought me back in. I think the first day it was 4 times they brought me back. So, I mean, I don't like what happens even just to your body when you're in a situation like that. I just remember my face hurt like really, really bad. And just my whole body felt sore, but like toxic. You know, I think it was just stress hormones were so bad. Anyway,
Yeah.
so after the fourth time, they took me back to solitary, and I guess they forgot about me because I didn't get dinner. Fine. Well, I can skip a meal. I don't care, right? But I was in a fleece, and this is Montana in the winter, so it was really, really cold, and whatever little room I was in was not heated. Um, and there was no bathroom, and I really had to pee. So there was a little plastic garbage can, and so I peed in the garbage can. And I tried to like kind of call out, like, "Hey, I just have to go to the bathroom. Can I please go to the bathroom?" Nobody came. And then the sun went down, and no dinner, and nobody came to get me. And then all I had was my seminar binder, and I just tried to sleep with the binder as a pillow and on this hard, with that industrial, like really hard carpet, no blanket or anything. I didn't sleep, I don't think, but I mean, the whole time, all I could think about was just, and it was really, I can't even say I felt sad. It was just like shell shocked. And then the next morning, the director, Cameron, came in, and you could see that he was really worried. you know, I mean, because that's obviously illegal, right? Leaving a kid uh,
Yeah.
with no food, no bedding, no bathroom break, in a cold, you know. And I think probably he knew that after what I'd been through, I was pretty suicidal. So he came in, and I could see that he was really worried. And then I could just see the relief like flow over his face. He's like, "Oh no, this is Cami. Cami will never tell anyone. Cami won't make a fuss. Like, it's fine. Everything's fine." Um, and then the seminar facilitator, his name was Dwayne Smotherman. He came in and just tried to intimidate the shit out of me.
For what purpose?
I think he also knew that this could be the source of a lot of trouble for the program if I even when I left, if I said something about it. And so I think that he was just really trying to drive the point home that I deserved that, and that I had brought it on myself, and it was my fault for rating myself 75 when I should have done 80 or whatever. And I remember I was sitting on the floor, the same floor I'd slept on, and he was in a chair, and he's like 6'5" or something, and he's like screaming down at me, and I'm just like, cool, dude, like, you win. I get it. I deserve everything. Thank you. Bye bye.
Mm. It's all of these stories that you're sharing, Cami. First of all, thank you for being so candid and so honest, because I know that takes a lot of courage, because this kind of stuff is incredibly difficult to talk about. I know that from personal experience. After spending a year and a half in this environment, when you finally got out, what was that experience like? Finally, being removed from this facility. I know we carry a lot of that trauma with us, and it takes a long time to work through. And it just so happens that you're a van lifer, very nomadic, which, for people that have experienced trauma, it seems like that's kind of a lifestyle that they gravitate towards. But what was that like once you were finally out of the program?
So by the time I was out, I don't even know if you can call it brainwashed, but I just, like, it's funny because when you're in something like that, your mind does things to kind of protect you, I guess. But
Mhm.
yeah, I was pretty brainwashed, and honestly, I was scared. I was scared to go home. Even though
Mm.
I don't think I had been in a great deal of danger when I was at home, while I was there in the program, they, like, you get rewarded for making very dramatic statements. For example, if you were to say, "Oh, if I wasn't here, I'd be dead. Oh, I was an addict. Oh, oh, yes, I was a virgin, but I was on my way to, like, I would have turned to like prostitution." Like, you just, if you make those really dramatic statements, you're rewarded for them. So, and if you say things over and over and over again, they start to feel really true to you. And I remember Cameron, the director, I used to babysit his kid all the time, like 3 or 4 days a week. My grandparents were paying $3,000 a month for me to be in a program so I could babysit the director's kid, because he trusted me. He
Wow.
knew that I was not a bad kid. He had cigarettes and alcohol in his house, and I never, I was, yeah, like, so even he said to me, and this was probably a year before I graduated, he said, "Cami, if you went home tomorrow, you'd be fine." But they had me pretty convinced that I was so fucked up that I was never going to be okay. So
Mm.
yeah, so I went through the whole program, and all the seminars and level 6, and I still feel like I haven't even really described what it was like there. Just every minute of your day was scheduled, and everything was, yeah, you didn't make any choices. Like, everything was just chosen for you. So going home was really scary. And they had you make a home contract, which was supposed to kind of like have rules for you to live by when you went home. And mine was really, really strict. And, it was approved by all the program staff and approved by my mom and everything. And I went home, and within like a day, my mom was like, "We don't need this." She was like, "This is stupid. Like, I trust you.
Really?
You're cool. You can do whatever." Yeah. Yeah. And, which just also kind of shows that she did not know what she had sent me to. You know what I mean? Because she was just like, whatever. My friends showed up on my doorstep maybe a day after I'd gotten home, really excited to see me. I mean, there were so many rumors that I had gotten kidnapped, that I had, gone to juvie, that I was pregnant and I was, somewhere else or whatever. So my friends found out I was home, showed up on my doorstep, and I like opened the door and I look at them and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, have you guys been smoking?" That was the first thing I said to my friends. I would not allow them into my house because the program convinced you everything I was before the program, everything I liked before the program, all of the people that I was with before the program were non-working. That was what past Cami chose, so it must be horrible. It must be bad, right?
Mm.
And so yeah, I wouldn't hang out with my friends. Just like went and made all new friends. I asked a new friend from that period, we're still friends now. And I said, what was I like, when you met me? And she goes, a little weird. She's like, the thing I really remember, she's like, you turned to me one day and you're like, why is everybody being so nice to me? She's like, because we like
Mm.
you, but I just wasn't used to not being held under the gun. Anyway,
Right.
though, but I went to BYU Hawaii, which is a Mormon college.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of slowly returned to my rebellious ways. I didn't smoke weed because that was illegal, but I drank a couple times while I was there, and I did. Oh my God, I had sex, in college. But I was convinced all the time that I was going to be sent back to the program. So, uh,
Mm.
first of all, I think my first inkling that maybe the thing that I had gone through, like, wasn't kosher, like, wasn't great, was in a psychology class, we learned about the Stanford prison experiment. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yep.
it's
Absolutely.
basically, at Stanford, Zimbardo was his name. I can't remember his full name, but this Professor Zimbardo brought these kids together and separated them. You're the guards, you're the inmates. And the guards started horribly abusing the inmates within days. And we were supposed to write a paper about this experiment. And again, it was like this where I wrote this paper. I kept catching myself, like I wasn't breathing when I wrote it, but I wrote about the program. And I was like, I've experienced this. Like, I've been in this situation. I've
Mm.
been both an inmate and a guard. And I abused and I was abused. And I turned in the paper, and I remember I got a really good grade, but the teacher never said anything to me. He wasn't like, are you okay? Like, something's wrong with you. Um, and then I remember also the first time that I flew home from Hawaii to visit my mom. I got in the front seat, and she had a water bottle in her, cup holder, and on the water bottle it said Spring Creek. And like, before there was even time for conscious thought, my entire body reacted, and I was not moving my head too much, but I was looking in the rearview mirror to see if there were two big men who were going to come get me. And I remember thinking,
Mm.
okay, my purse is in the trunk, or, all my luggage is in the trunk, but I can probably get pretty far on foot. And if it looks like they're going to catch me, because this was Oakland Airport and there was an overpass kind of thing, I'll just jump off the overpass. And all of that went through my head
Wow.
before, like, my prefrontal cortex like caught up. And by the time, like, I wasn't breathing again, and my mom had started driving, and she turns to me, she goes, why are you being so quiet, like, you're not saying anything? And I just said, I was like, Mom, I saw that water bottle and I thought that you had met with the program again and that you were going to send me back. And she just
Mm.
laughed. She's like, what are you talking about? Like, I was a straight A student, I was putting myself through college, nobody was helping me, there was no reason to believe that I would get sent back to the program. And I mean, the most recent panic attack I had within a year. I'm 42. That happened when I was 16. Or I was sent to the program when I was 16. But I was at a doctor's appointment, and something triggered. I don't know what it was, but I started. I mean, it wasn't really like an outward panic attack. It was just all inside. And the doctor, who was just this really intuitive black lady, like, I love her. She just turned and she goes, what is going on with you right now? She's like, something is wrong. And I just said,
Mm.
I'm so sorry. I've had a bad experience, and I'm just like triggered. And she just like grabbed me and she just goes, you're in a safe space right now. And I was like, oh God, are you sure? But to have
Wow.
that still happening this many years later is like, I mean, it's embarrassing, but
Oh, I don't think it's embarrassing at all, Cami. I think,
Yeah.
you've been through something that traumatic, that stuck with you for that long. And it's very clear to me that you've done a lot of work to try to process through and work through that
how
trauma.
do
And
you
some of
do
it
it?
just sticks with you. And it still brings up a
Yeah.
lot for me when I talk about being locked in solitary confinement for a week, and how I severely abused drugs and alcohol after that experience, to try to forget. And so,
Yeah.
you know, the emotion that gets tied to that and the way that it can put your body in that fight or flight mentality, it's, I don't know. I think we just kind of take it one day at a time and try to work through as much as we can, but recognize that, you know, it's a lifelong process sometimes.
Well, I have to say, like, I lived the shit out of my 20s and 30s. Like, you know, and I really kept all the program stuff on the back burner. I mean, I lived in Hawaii, I lived in Italy, I lived in Taiwan for 7 years. And actually one of my therapists was, well, the only therapist I've really had since the program. She was like, I think part of the reason you lived in Taiwan is because you felt safer there. And I did. I was like, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
totally did. I knew they weren't going to lock me up. You know, as long as I like followed the laws, I wasn't going to get locked up. Um, and so, but yeah, I don't know. It's just funny because I did all that. I've done van life for 8 years. I always worked remotely, so that was really cool. But now that I'm in my 40s, I'm like, I actually don't feel uh, like I'm doing very well. Like I'm not
Oh,
super thrilled with where I'm at in life, and that's kind of I think part of what sort of led me back to look like, okay, why can't I work a corporate job? Why are relationships so incredibly uncomfortable for me? I just want to run immediately.
mm,
As soon as somebody wants to get close to me, I'm just like, ugh, like stop that. Right. Like having a job, if somebody's observing me every day, that's like I can't tolerate it. It's really painful. I can't handle it. So having a remote job and living van life, like I call my van my escape pod. I'm like, the second if things get hairy,
mm,
I can just get in and drive my whole house away. Like I'm never stuck anywhere. I'm never stuck with scary roommates or landlords or a boss or anything. But I'm also like, I think that mentality also keeps me from, some of the things that really give most people's lives a lot of meaning, like family and yeah, like a career that matters and relationships and community. So I think I kind of call my 40s my like, why am I like this decade? Like where you look back and you go, okay, why am I like this? And all roads kind of lead to the program. Like every time I try to
mm.
figure out like what is going on with me, I'm like, oh shit, that's from the program.
You know, it's kind of interesting, Cami, because you know, one of my really good friends, Bryce, who did a podcast series with me on the cult that he and I both grew up in.
I listened to you guys today. You guys are hilarious together.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because Bryce has that same perspective where, you know, he's in his 40s. He feels like he hasn't accomplished any of what he wanted to, right? He feels very lost at times.
Mm-hmm.
He feels like he hasn't succeeded the way that he wants to. And you know, it's so interesting that growing up with those extremely controlling mechanisms in place, you tend to feel lost a little bit once you get older.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the thing that I've shared with Bryce and many people have shared with Bryce through the podcast was give yourself grace and recognize that it is a process and you are right where you're supposed to be in this moment.
Oh
And
man,
the
no.
most that we can do is continue putting one foot in front of the other, you know?
I just feel like for the opportunities that I've had and for, like I was a smart kid, I was good at school. I just feel like I should be doing so much more. And like I said, I lived the crap out of my 20s and 30s. Man, I did. I traveled, I did everything. But yeah, I'm not satisfied with where I'm at. I don't really give myself grace. I want more. And since I'm not Mormon anymore, I believe this is it. This is my one chance at life.
Mm,
I want to do something with it. So that's kind of where I'm left trying to figure that out.
yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not thrilled with it.
Cami, I know we've talked about so much today. And it's been just an absolute roller coaster. And I wanted to say again how much I appreciate you sharing all of this with us. It's just it's so impactful, and I think there's people out there that need to hear your message. Is there a way that people can follow you on social media? Do you have any channels that you'd like people to find you on?
You know what? That's so funny. Today, I was like, everybody always asks that at the end of podcasts, and I'm not like a big social media person. I'm just not very active on that stuff. But I just created on Instagram an Instagram account called We Were Programmed. So it's WEWEREPROGRAMMED. That's actually the working title for the book I'm writing. I feel the best when I'm writing about the program, like when I'm writing it all and just getting it out and just feeling like I captured it, and put it on paper. So I am writing a book about the program, but I just created that account. I have not even posted a single post on it yet, but I'm going to. I'm preparing one right now that actually talks about the crossroads between the program and the Mormon church, because I grew up Mormon. I'm ex-Mormon now, and I have a lot of thoughts about why the Mormon church and why so many of these programs are in Utah.
Well, thank you again. I think I've said thank you like 5 times now, Cami, but truly thank you for taking this time to sit down and talk with us. It's just, it's so powerful what you have to say. And I'd love to have a follow-up conversation about this. But thank you again for your time. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for being courageous.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Y'all, please like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you again next week. We love you. Bye.